Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this episode of A Renewed Hope, where we are focusing on AI MINDSystems Foundation's National HERO Initiative. It's Friday, June 13th. I'm incredibly excited to introduce new colleagues and new passion and momentum that has jumped into the National HERO Initiative. And in today's discussion, we're also going to be focusing on matters of veteran occupational health, vocational experiences, both in service and as veterans in the community. And I'm very delighted to introduce colleagues. Before we introduce our new team members, I'm starting with me. I'm Heather Flannery. I'm the CEO here at AI MINDSystems Foundation. And along with my co-founder, Dr. Sean Mannion, we have been working on the National HERO Initiative for many years. And over to you, Sean, for your quick intro.
Certainly. Thank you, Heather. My name is Sean Mannion. I am the co-founder and chief scientific officer here at AI MINDSystems Foundation. My background is as a neuroscientist. I was trained at Uniformed Services University of the Health Sciences as a civilian in their neuroscience program, and then did a postdoc there before being briefly a contractor and then government civilian for the Department of Defense's Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center. Gave me a great appreciation for the challenges with military medicine and also the transition to veteran medicine, and what we could use different types of emerging technology to do better. So that's what brings us here all together today, and it's great to be here along with some new partners.
Thanks so much, Sean. And now I would love to introduce Tom Fournier. Tom, take it away with your new role and your background.
Hello to everyone. It's really a privilege to be here. So I've recently joined as the operations officer and strategic partnerships for our National HERO Initiative as part of AI MINDSystems Foundation. I'm a career military officer by trade, recently retired in 2019, but also a three-time veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan, and recently transitioned out and joined the rest of the civilian world here. Since then, I've worked in higher education, worked for some biotech companies, and worked with integration of combat casualty care in Ukraine for some 8As and nonprofits, and working with NATO. I'm a NATO advisor and also mentor for the NATO Diana project, which is the Defense Innovation Accelerator North Atlantic, working with startups and other accelerators trying to help with some of our world's biggest challenges as they relate to the alliance and national struggles with health, technology, integration.
Well, thank you, Tom. Having you in the chief of operations role for this initiative is an honor, and we are all of us at AI MINDSystems Foundation grateful for the leadership you are bringing to the table, so that we have the execution and delivery excellence that I know that you can coordinate and drive, especially considering the large and ambitious scale and scope of what we're seeking to take on here. So thank you for that. So next, I am very pleased to introduce Dr. Jordan Orley, who is our Vice President of Medical Affairs for Occupational and Environmental Health, and in the National HERO Initiative, the Medical Director for Occupational and Environmental Health. Over to you, Jordan. Dr. Orley.
Thank you, Heather. I'm very excited to be here and participate. And it's wonderful to be part of this forward-thinking organization. A little background, I've spent the past 8 years as an independent medical examiner and contractor for the VA, performing medical disability examinations on behalf of veterans. And in that time, I've met with over 8,000 veterans and written about 5,000 medical legal opinions, and continuously have been seeking to improve the process which is what led me to join AI Mind Systems and their vision for the future of compensation exams for veterans. I'm also currently a Master's of Public Health student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I'm focusing my MD thesis on the PACT Act and whether it's been rolled out sufficiently and any shortcomings at the level of the VA in relation to environmental exposures going forward beyond the PACT Act into the future. So without going into more detail, it's great to be here, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Dr. Orley, everything that you are bringing to the table for us to make very rapid progress down a well-known scope of extremely concrete but totally unresolved challenges is such a blessing. And the fact that your work and your ideas and your vision aligned so complementary with the National HERO Initiative, it's just fantastic to have brought this together. So thank you as well. Next, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Carla Ballard, who will be playing a very compelling and vital role engaging with military families and communities under the National HERO Initiative. Carla, over to you.
Well, first of all, thank you, and just so grateful to be amongst colleagues at this caliber. And I just want to thank you all for the service that you are committing to and the sacrifice, frankly, as a granddaughter of a World War II veteran, niece of a Vietnam veteran. I could go on and on. The history, I'm also the fifth generation of Vice President Burr, granddaughter. And so when we talk about military families, it's something that for me, I've lived every step of the way. And I continue to serve in a capacity that allows for me to at least recognize every day the commitment and the sacrifice that our vets make and our enlisted make. And so for the last 6 years, I've been serving with Blue Star Families, led in the committee that I'm a part of with General Tom Bostic. And I am thrilled to be working alongside generals and colleagues and veterans who care tremendously. And we actually do something about it. You know, a lot of the work that we're going to be doing and prayerfully in partnership, Heather, right, with AI Mind Systems is having the ability to expand the work and to take it to that next level with some of the new technologies that you and I have been talking about. I've created a platform that allows for our social trusted networks to start doing gigs with each other, all in demand, decentralizing work as we know it. And a lot of our veterans love to serve, right? And so love to serve each other and be there for each other, show up for each other. And I've had the opportunity to really enjoy that experience. And I tell you, what we're doing in Philadelphia, where this entire country was, founded upon, we're looking at creating our first outpost in our first chapter of Blue Star Families. Now, I like to say it's a little bit dated, but that's the work I'm doing with this administration in Philadelphia. The mayor's administration, Mayor Parker, is looking at how we can explore to have our services, Blue Star Families, dedicated there. So I am thrilled to be working with each of you and look forward to this discussion.
Thank you so much, Carla. You will be bringing so much to the table, I know, including so much heart and passion for this work. And it means a great deal to all of us and all of those that we seek to serve. So this is an interesting assemblage. We have a career military leader and multiple combat veteran who has just recently transitioned from service. We've got a scientist who spent the bulk of his career seeking to aid in how we deal with a huge number of traumatic brain injury cases among through these last 20 years of war, and focusing on incredible work in that area. We have a physician focusing on in the weeds, in the details, how to get veterans the benefits that they earned and deserve for their service, in ways that are efficient, transparent, appropriate, and hopefully procedurally painless in that process. And the one of the things that I think, for those of you that have been following the National HERO Initiative, this may be a little bit redundant, but our target cohort for the National HERO Initiative includes active duty military service members, veterans, and first responders, and also and always their immediate families, all of their families, because we firmly and passionately believe that every sacrifice, all of the service, the entire experiences, the weight, the burden, the love, the sharing, the commitment, the good and the bad, and the nightmares and the joy, it is all unified and whole. And when we want to serve the cohort that are those who served. We need to look at the entire family experience and the communities within which active duty are returning home into, and so on. So I think what I'd love to start with here in this really interesting cross section of skills and backgrounds that are assembled is just looking a little bit about how is life different when you are enlisted in the military, then you're going through this transition into veteran status. That window of transition is one that we're very focused on early in the National HERO Initiative. And the ability to achieve stability and prosperity and security for oneself and one's family is a critical factor. So let's unpack that a little bit from each of these different perspectives that you bring to the table. I want to start quickly with you, Sean, just as an acknowledgement of how many combat veterans experience injury and trauma, including traumatic brain injury, but not limited to it. That materially affects their return to civilian life. And I think maybe if we just touch on the scientific dimension of your learnings, thinking about TBI as an important example, and then go to you, Dr. Orley, from the medical practice perspective. Let's begin there.
Well, certainly, and there's surveillance numbers out there on those injuries, what are sometimes called the hidden injuries of war, and post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury are hard to calculate because oftentimes they aren't apparent or don't become apparent for a while, or sometimes even hidden. I know people within my own family who've served in the military, and in order to keep their security clearance and not have that threatened, they didn't seek treatment for PTSD, and that's not uncommon, and that's post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I think the numbers on that continue to be significant. And the traumatic brain injury happens in theater, but it also happens in training. We used to do a lot of our research at Fort Bragg, where there's a number of injuries from people training to do parachute jumps. So there's a lot of ways you can get injured in the military, even outside of being in theater in a combat situation. And so how those injuries can persist, how they can show up, how they can affect everything from memory to mood to how you interact with the rest of the world, your family, your friends, with how you might withdraw from those, the intersection with substance abuse that can happen. It becomes a long tail problem. And we there's a congressionally mandated study, the 15-year longitudinal study that's still underway within DoD and reaching out within in parts of the VA. And they're seeing, how these problems persist, how they bring about failure to thrive, especially after transition, which can itself be hard, even if you don't have these brain injuries or other issues. And so how we get into the community of veterans, how we intervene is oftentimes not just as easy as, well, we set up a clinic, they'll come to us. Intervening through peer groups, intervening through different types of activities that they might go to so that it is less challenging. The stigma is not there for seeking treatment. There was a VA researcher that I learned a lot from, a neuropsychologist who's now retired, Rodney Vanderplu, and he used to refer to it as post-deployment gunk. He said, we can worry about it another time, whether someone hit their head or someone saw someone die or someone had some sort of reaction to a lot of different things that could have injured them. The bottom line is they're having problems now. And so figuring out how to solve those problems, figuring out how to stop that bleeding is, I think, really front and center. And so making sure people who are in crisis are able to get help, but also making sure people who are on the path to crisis, having interventions for them before it ever gets that far is something that we want to think about. And the more we can do with data available, the more we can do with making that data private, so more of it is available for identifying problems and then finding the right solutions. That's where the technology comes into play, and that's where our National HERO initiative comes front and center.
Mhm.
Absolutely, Sean. And then it's unintuitive for the general public who is not familiar with this space to imagine that all of these various physical and mental health sequela that you're talking about, that a veteran could be in a situation where they need care and they can't get it. They can't get it. They can't afford it. They've got blockers, and that there are procedural hoops to jump through that can sometimes exceed a person's executive functioning or ability or capacity, especially if they are in an acute, mental health crisis or other health crisis or economic crisis. So, Dr. Orley, through your thousands and thousands of interactions with veterans in those kinds of stages and points in their life, what observations can you make about the opportunities that we have here?
Yeah, the opportunities are great because there are between 3 and 4 million veterans each year undergoing compensation exams out of the 15 million eligible veterans, and that number is growing by 10 to 20% each year over the past 2 years. And veterans, when they come to see me for their compensation and pension exams, that is typically it's been a long road for them to reach that point. They've seen multiple doctors. They have struggled to access care, and at which point they see me, they're actually struggling from a financial perspective many times, which is why they're seeking compensation for their injuries and illnesses that derive from their service. One of the social determinants of health is financial security, and so this paycheck that they may receive from for their disability is vital, not only to their financial security but also to their overall health. And so it plays an important role in the entire ecosystem, not just at the level of the VA, but at the level of the VBA, which is the Veteran Benefits Administration. So the VA is under the VHA, which is Veterans Health Administration, and they don't really speak with the VBA, which administers the benefits, but they're both vital to veterans' well-being. And veterans are often approaching these exams with trepidation and fear that they're going to be denied, that they're not going to have a fair exam. And these are valid concerns because the system as it currently is set up is really not in favor of the veterans. The medical records are not accessible to the examiners, or there's thousands upon thousands of pages um, of documents that the examiner is meant to review, which is just not feasible. So the veterans have a point in saying this exam is stacked against them, and they can go to VSOs, they can go to other veteran service organizations, uh, Wounded Warrior Project, Veterans of Foreign Wars, and they can get assistance. But that assistance is sometimes lacking in the intimate understanding of what is an exam and what are the details that go into being successful in placing a claim. So that is something that I'm passionate about. It's not a typical field that a physician becomes an expert in, but over time, I realized that I started to really care about the population of veterans that I was serving and their well-being, and I wanted to give each and every one of them my utmost in a fair review and a good review of the medical records, and they deserve that. Their injuries, as Sean said, are oftentimes out of proportion to civilian injuries. They're putting themselves at risk, jumping out of airplanes, as he mentioned, in combat. Also, there's mental health concerns that are oftentimes silent, especially in the medical records, and they only come about when they come to seek compensation and they say, I had traumatic, experience in the military. And so they meet with an examiner who's a mental health specialist and they discuss it. But oftentimes it's in the shadows. So it comes to light. A lot of things come to light when they do come in for their compensation exams that theretofore had not been documented. So good documentation is very important for me as an examiner, and I think veterans in general just need more guidance in placing their claims and in um, uh, navigating the claims process overall.
Thank you, Dr. Orley. And where I'd love to build on this at this point is, so we're discussing the kinds of process and medical experiences that veterans are having. And you mentioned financial difficulty, and very often because there's an anxiety, there's emotional difficulty, I have to imagine, in having to even wade back in to one's personal stories that can be so incredibly painful potentially. And then so much paperwork and forms and procedures and a requirement to be able to obtain, understand, act upon complex longitudinal data from many sources. That just imagine that for a second, any of you from outside this field, that's overwhelming. That's overwhelming. And if you have a person who is being driven to push through those barriers because they and potentially their families are in financial distress, I mean that is an entirely additional level of both urgency and pain as that experience is being navigated. What I'd love to do next is I want to turn to you, Carla, and then to you, Tom. Carla, I would love if you have a great deal of insight about employment and occupational scenarios, and also social and environmental determinants of health generally. What happens when a veteran is seeking to re-enter the workforce? What can community thinking do for that if it were approached differently? And then right after that, Tom, you've been hearing others' perspectives about these problems and processes. I would love it if you could give your personal experiences that you're willing to share that intersect with all of these challenges and opportunities. And I'm sure you have so many brothers and sisters in arms whose stories you will never forget, and you have a broad point of view, not only your own unique story, but so many. So Carla, what say you about?
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you're asking this question, because here's the good news. So sometimes we can get into a space where it's just doom and gloom, right? But here's where I feel really good. We are finding more civilians wanting to support our veterans. Like, I'm loving that part, right? And with Blue Star Families, we're creating space for, civilians to come in and be a part of the ecosystem of support. So that's one thing that's happening. We have a real effort right now, even with the work that we're doing for outposts and chapters, to make sure that we're reaching out to organizations where you would uncommonly see sort of VSO type of support, right? Veteran service organizations, when I say that. So one of the things that in Philadelphia we're doing is not just working with VSOs. We're going outside of that structure and being able to, for instance, Bunker Labs. Many of you probably have heard about Bunker Labs on the line, where they're working with corporations, they're working with other nonprofit organizations to empower veterans to, become really familiar with that entrepreneurial journey. And that, to me, gets to be a wonderful way to start to address some of those economic challenges that do come up. The other piece too is being able to have, when you're a veteran in the workforce, there are going to be certain triggers that pop up, right? That may not happen for a civilian who's not been through this service. And so being able to now educate more of the employers. I was doing some great work with Comcast NBC, super fans of what they're doing as it relates to our veterans, because they're committed to making sure the workforce is well aware of some of those things that may come up for vets. So because our corporate partners, our civilian partners are doing a better job of leaning in and saying, we want to be there, we are going to be way more sensitive to the fact that individuals may have gone through experiences that could be re-triggered, right? So I think that's huge. I think the other piece too is just holding space. A dear friend of mine, Jimmy White, who's doing a lot of work, again, in Philadelphia, but around the country, frankly, with veteran services. I'm so excited because he will go and bring vets together just to hang out, just to hold space for each other and talk about these issues of employment, of challenges. And then he'll get his civilian friends to come in. So just those moments of, it's not formal, it's not with an organization. I'm seeing more of that. And so that's the kind of like the good news I want to bring forward, is that we're seeing more civilians step up and saying we want to be of support. And I think this is a good time for organizations like ourselves to then inform people, right? To keep people really informed. These are the top things that you're going to want to keep in mind. But that's where I get excited, is that I see more of us wanting to show up for our vets.
Thank you, Carla. It's wonderful hearing that the social and cultural change underway, that we can help accelerate and amplify our work. Over to you, Tom.
Yeah, great. First, it's really heartwarming to see so many intelligent people with a mission of helping our veterans and helping our veteran families, our military families, our first responders. And the work that you've all done is it really makes me always feel very good to know that we have different groups looking out, and individuals who are, transition from being, a medical, practitioner to being someone who actually cares and has personal relationships with the individuals at hand. I'd say I'd really encapsulate, if you look at a military career, especially those who are in my cohort or year group, where 9/11 happened about 2 years into our time in service, and the rest of our time was either deployed or getting ready for deployment. And I think I shared, from the beginning, you can almost capstone it in two books that I always refer for, Grossman's on Killing, which starts with really how our basic training, our training to really overcome fear through repetition, through our training exercises, to really overmatch our natural sense of fear, our natural senses of kind of our primordial center brain, our fight or flight. We overwire that with our training, our exposure, and that is something that it can take months of basic of your training, then advanced training, and worse scenarios where you night vision, all these things that increase the compression while expecting you to still be able to perform. Just because it's in training doesn't mean that it is any less formative in your ability to override that rational frontal part of your brain with that. I'm gonna tone all this down and still execute. So you multiply that over now combat deployments, over years of combat deployments, over years of realistic training. And then you get about 6 months to unwire possibly 20 to 30 years of overmatching, overwiring everything that you had seen and done and how you have programmed your brain for that. And there is nothing that addresses that in regards to you spent all this time doing that. And that's where the second book, on the bookend of a career, you start off with this overmatch, this indoctrination of violence, baptism in violence to overcome that. And then I talk a lot to people about the body keeps score, Dr. Vanderkolk, and how there are some markers, there are some things in there. You could read that and you feel like it's an instruction manual for your post-military career. You're like, I have those things that starts to resonate with a lot of people. So you look at those bookends. Wow, I spent an entire career shutting down so many of my normal responses. I'm not supposed to be hurt. I'm not supposed to feel pain. I'm supposed to suck it up and drive on. And showing of those things are a bit of a weakness. So you turn those things off. And then you go back to a society where you are damaged. Your body keeps score. That's it. It does. It absolutely does. And it will come at the worst possible times, whether it is, backfire of a car or a 4th of July celebration that you weren't expecting early, or a scream from a kid on a playground. Those things are triggering events that happen in everyday society, and something that you ignored and haven't gotten taken care of can come back to you in a absolute rush. So if you think about that, anywhere from 10 to 15 years, doesn't have to be that. You could have one deployment, one incident that could trigger and cause that damage. But if you think of that programming that happens of us, and we need it, we absolutely need to be able to function in those environments. But the off ramp is not proportional to the on ramp. And we end up pushing our folks, and we do not educate and train our families to help them see the telltale signs. Now, make a list of someone who's suffering from TBI and PTSD, who many of those symptoms overlap and sometimes are indistinguishable. And now look at what we define as a toxic leader in the military, or as a bad spouse in a divorce hearing. And you start looking at some of those things and go, wow, that's somebody who probably needed help. That was a leader in service who was probably showing indicators that they were suffering from some type of PTSD or TBI. And we're looking at the symptoms. They're not going to get help, to the points made earlier by our medical professionals, that we know that will be detrimental to our career, certainly as an officer. Certainly as an officer, I can speak firsthand that a lot of people had TBI, had issues that they were not going to report, so they knew they would not get promoted. The presumption that would happen, that they'd be stigmatized as a result of it. Moving on to, from a perspective of the families, they're often the first ones to see these warnings and indicators. I've seen these young families come in at the beginning of the war, young, virile, happy newlyweds with these young, beautiful children, and they end their service. First deployment, little shine taken off. Second deployment, a little less. In 3 years, you see these young, virile families, and there's a dullness to them. There's stress. There's pressure on them, on their marriages. Gone for 12 months, back for 12, gone for 15. This was the heart of the war. It had a high toll, both physically, emotionally, physically. You have a group of individuals, the surge, you had people coming in to do a deployment and they were literally ushered out without any introduction to what care was available for them, what VSOs were available. And they were leaving with that mentality that if I complain, then I'm a whiner. If I got to suck it up, pain is whatever. We don't have the same measure of scale of when they give you that little smiley face at the doctor's office, where if you're over here, you're feeling great, and over here you're a 10. A 6 for us could be a 10 to a 15 for someone else because we're trained to repress a lot of those things and not to really give a full report of how bad we're hurting. That's just part of our indoctrination. That's part of our culture. So when you look at those things and then you come out, there are no good resources. Jordan talked about, we have to have this medical, all these VSOs, all this paperwork. Bureaus within the own agency to look after veterans don't even talk to each other. So why is that even a thing? Like, why shouldn't that should be automatic? And that when I leave service, I have an electronic message that has, here's your entire electronic file with your, here's everything that's happened to you since the day you walked in and everything was registered to the day you got out. Here's your report. Why do I even have to file? You're leaving service. This should be automated. And here are the things you should look out for when you leave. Here are all the federal programs that apply to you. Here's your VA benefits. Here's everything that goes down from there. Here are all the state benefits unique to the place where you're moving to that support veterans. Here's the Yellow Ribbon Program. Here are all the other things. Here's special programs in your state. Here's special programs in your community. As a veteran, here's what you're entitled to in our state, in our community, with your spouse, your dependents. Here's everything that they're entitled to, start to bottom. And by the way, there's a special trial going on down at the next city for you and your family that's studying TBI, that's studying burn pit exposure, and you qualify for that. Rather than my experience is that I had to find a lot of that stuff. I knew the big stuff from the federal government, but I wasn't opted into a study. I wasn't given an option. But boy, if I Google something, if I'm looking for a fishing pole, I'm going to get about 30 ads for a fishing pole in the next, week about, hey, understand you're looking for a fishing pole. Why can't that same data that's being turned against us and monetized by private companies not be used for good and saying, we understand you're a combat veteran with the following medical problems, and here are the things. If you opted in and said, I would love information on TBI studies, I'd love information on training my family on understanding and seeing the indicators and warnings of mental health or deterioration, and here's the support that they should go to. I am a firm believer that no military service member or first responder should go to mental health training or go to anything without their significant other or family member with them to help them identify. For those unmarried or without partners, a mother should be there, a father, a trusted relative, a sister, brother, someone to say, hey, remember that training we went to? You're showing hypervigilance right now. You're showing signs of overreaction right now to something that you never would have. The people who know us best recognize that we have changed. So they have to be informed and they have to be given the tools to not only respond, but to help us see ourselves sometimes. Because when you're in it, you can't see it. So if we can leverage that same monetary capitalist mentality of how to sell us things, how can we use that for why? This is what I'm so excited about this project is how can we take that data? How can we take those things, align it with our medical system and make sure that when they opt in, that now you have this, there's everywhere you go, it's the most bipartisan, non-political issue. Everyone wants to support their veterans. It's overwhelming, right? We talk about it in the articles, we talk about it, it's overwhelming. So how do we have something where we can check in, say what we want, and then we're aware of the things that are most applicable to us in a time and place in which we retire. So I've got more to say about, many of these subjects, but it is not easy transitioning. You leave your tribe, you leave an ethos, you leave a sense of community, and you try and find another one. And a lot of us, the common denominator is honor, integrity, values, and taking care of each other in a way that most people don't understand. And that's the hard part, finding your tribe and then trying to, work back into a system where you're valued for what you bring. We're not high school dropouts that had no other chance or options in life. A judge never told me I had to go in the military or go to jail, but you'd be surprised by how many parts of the country still have that perception, especially in regions that don't have a large military population. They don't understand that we are highly educated, highly trained, highly organized, very loyal, That's where I'll put the pin in for now, but open up to any more dialogue on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. That was, I wanted to applaud at multiple points in all that you just had to say. And I wanted to, Dr. Teta, as you also fairly recently retired from the military after a full career, I'd love, would you weigh in and share your personal perspective and point of view about your own story and the accumulated perspective you have in your role of so many other service members that you led and engaged with. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you for that invitation to speak. Heather, I do want to just underscore and thank Carla and Dr. Orley and of course Tom for, pointing out many of the things that, we have all convened to address and hopefully, solve in terms of problems and the challenges and so forth. Every much of what Tom said completely resonated with me as a physician, retired Navy captain, physician in the military for years, taking care of both active duty and, of course, people transitioning out and their family members. I had no idea what I was in store for when I was transitioning myself. And so Tom, you point out so much of what doesn't make a lot of sense to me intuitively. Serving as a chief medical informatics officer for the Navy, we worked on this whole big investment through this electronic health care modernization initiative. You would think, of course, all of our records are codified, digitized, ready to be transferred to the next, sort of enterprise of our care, which would be the VA system or wherever it was supposed to go. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, to this day, there are things that were not included in my record. And I'm coming from this at a place and a posture of understanding healthcare, understanding what I went through as as an officer with multiple deployments to places that, we're learning now were in fact, harmful to health, whether it be Afghanistan, South Asia, anywhere. The burn pits were there is just one of those, uh, things that have been identified as a risk to health. But yet, in the transition, none of that stuff transferred over. And so I think our mandate, I think our challenge, our charge, and certainly what we should be collectively working on is leveraging the tools that we know are available, right? And whether it be AI, whether it be the electronic health record that is still, sort of maturing as it's going through this implementation phase across the entire enterprise, to really bring to bear the assets that are so critical in determining, as Dr. Orley so eloquently put out, what is needed and necessary and the right for veterans to have at the time of their transition, to make them whole in so many ways for living the next chapter of their lives beyond service. Carla has rightfully pointed out too that there are so many places and ways to meet veterans where they are that could be very impactful, not only to help them with a transition, but to make them thrive in their next chapter of life, which I think is really important. And Tom, you said it. No one is disputing that, right? From a cultural, from a societal, from a political view, everyone seems to be on the same page with that. But yet there's this seeming inertia to really get it done. So I hope our conversations spark, a sort of a groundswell of support for our National Hero Initiative, for the things that we're working on, for the many things that Heather, you have espoused through AI MINDSystems Foundation in terms of how we can leverage the many assets, digital and technologically and human capital to sort of bring to bear lots of solutions to these problems. It's not like any of this stuff doesn't exist. That's the thing. They're all out there. These tools exist for us, and there's never a shortage of ads and things that come following us in terms of digital wares. But yet, when it comes to how those could be leveraged to help veterans, things are not so well coordinated. And I think that's really, I think represents an opportunity for us. And, I think that's why we're all here. We're excited about it. And I do go back to saying, I hope that our conversations and the things that we're talking about engender and inspire and sort of, recruit others to realize that there is an opportunity here for us to do some really good things that can help us. And at a very high level, it's more than just helping that veteran, right? It's helping the person that's going to enlist. It's part of our national security apparatus. Because if you are trying to recruit the best and the brightest to come serve, which I believe the military has been doing, very well, part of that is because at least when I did and I joined, and I think many of the people that join now, they believe that, if something happens to me or my family, we'll be taken care of. Not only while we're in service, but certainly when we get out. Many presidents have echoed that very same, unwritten rule, and that compact and that trust and that contract. I think we have a way to really reinforce that and validate that to be true with leveraging these technologies to make that, not just something that's hyperbole, but something that's actually concrete. So, yeah, I believe our National Hero Initiative is that very charge, that very vanguard to really, sort of realize the thing that we're all trying to work toward.
Thank you so much, Dr. Teta. And with that, I'd love to turn the conversation in this last segment here to the how, to the concrete, practical. How is it, in fact, that under the National Hero Initiative, we will be applying a series of different emerging technologies that introduce entirely new possibilities? In fact, the challenges that we've chosen to take on in this initiative, I would suggest, could not have been tackled in the past. That what we have seen was our society's very best effort with the tools available in the toolbox. And today we have blockchain and Web3 technologies, which is not one thing, but a comprehensive set of new technologies that amount to the first technological basis to use computing that we all know and love in a completely collaborative manner. It is an ability for individual people, institutions, organizations to be able to have coherence, to establish trust on all the data that moves between them, and to orchestrate processes that span multiple people and multiple organizations. That's impossible in today's world. You can't do that. That's just not how the world works. You can optimize everything you want inside of the four walls of one institution, and you've optimized everything inside the four walls of one institution. That does not get it done when we need truly person-centered solutions. Under the National Hero Initiative, the national heroes that join our initiative will be outfitted with a first of its kind, person-centered and person-sovereign technology infrastructure that allows them to engage in these multi-party coordination and trust relationships. And that same technology apparatus allows individual people to be able to use and benefit from an extraordinarily powerful emerging suite of AI capabilities, but without any conflict of interest, while retaining full privacy and in a trust model where they are able to be supported by AI models and agents that only act on their behalf, that only act on their data, that can coordinate and orchestrate things in a vast, complex apparatus that no individual person would ever be able to achieve. None of us could do that. But now we can combine that powerful use of AI with the heart of what we mean in healthcare, with a person-centered learning health system, and the trust, governance, and coordination technology that we have with blockchain and Web3, economically, technically, socio-technically. That's what National HERO is bringing about. The implications for scientific research and research translation are vast in this, and that I do want to touch on that just a little bit. It's one of the things that was brought up, Tom, in what you were saying, was that when we're talking about matching resources to need on a completely personalized basis, contextualized to an individual and as a holistic view of that person, not a health record. A health record is not a human being, right? You talked about being able to access investigational therapeutics or investigational treatment modalities. Sean, I would love if you can. I want to bring out this scientific potential of National HERO from your point of view, which is a really important part of what we are bringing about. Maybe thinking about the implications for trial matching, for example, that we've worked on extensively. Over to you.
Well, certainly, and there's the ground floor level applications where they're less risky, they're less interventional, but you've got ability to manage and see things in administrative data or in trial matching data with different types of demographics, inclusion, exclusion criteria, getting into more nuance of who can fit into a study, what types of categories you can break a study down into. We did a congressionally mandated cognitive rehabilitation study when I was at DivBIC, and it was the folks at San Antonio and Tampa VA who executed it, but I got to oversee it, and it really opened my eyes. It was a 4-arm randomized clinical trial, and it really opened my eyes to the different categories of intervention, but also to the different categories of individual. You can't just take a study and assume everyone's the same, and then you just average out of that study. You have responders and non-responders, especially when you get into complex treatments and complex problems like post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's not does this drug work or does it not work? You don't see the differences that you do in an average pharmaceutical trial when you start to have behavioral interventions. You start to see a whole spectrum of responses. And it might be the case that, as it was in that study, those who had comorbid PTSD with chronic traumatic brain injury issues responded better to the cognitive rehabilitation, thereby giving you a personalization to what that treatment is. And so the same way with trials, being able to articulate more data about individuals and more data about treatments and treatment delivery to get more fine-tuned, fine-grained detail about who responds to what in what context. And the context is huge as well. And so I think as we get more data at the disposal, at the safe and private disposal of those individuals who are doing the research, you enable them to give back that more and more personalized medicine that can help people in different ways. With maybe somebody does need a lot of therapy with a one-on-one, maybe someone else needs group therapy with occasional recreational activities with peers, and how to minimize the burden on the individuals in the treatment that you give them. The time burden, the cost burden, the travel burden is another aspect to it. So there's a lot we can do if we have more data available.
I jump on a little tail piece of that too. Imagine a world where someone starts showing up and has different areas of ailments, and you can immediately cross-reference them across an entire military, saying, so and so is in this unit during this time, and they are also having the same symptoms as someone who lives on the other side of the country who served in that unit at that time with them. And now this other person's coming in. They may be the first ones to show signs, let's say, of a burn pit exposure with anything that falls within the PAC Act. Now, not only do you have that ability to trend analysis that someone in a certain place, certain time that shared the same location has this, but this person may be the first one to start show signs of it, but you could get the rest of them in to start doing preemptive studies and testing to make sure that you catch it earlier. So certain cancers caught earlier because you shared the same space. You may not have it. Typically, most people don't have some of these cancers until it's too late. Or if you're looking at a 9/11 scenario for first responders, everyone from this firehouse started to have certain things, and they were at Tower 1, and they had these things. Now people who may have moved out of the area, they're no longer in the even in that form of line of work, now you're contacting them. Now you're saying, hey, you're in this registry. I'm going to push this information. Do it with what you will, but here's where your resources are. Here's what we think it may be. Here are the tests that we're going to run specifically now, tailored to what we're seeing in your peers, to mitigate some of these things. Can you imagine a world where that existed, where you'd be able to do that at a moment's notice, and AI with data can literally alert you with certain algorithms. It can tell you that these trends are happening before you could ever notice them. Not to mention a COVID outbreak with certain tracking of various things in waters and wastewater, and how to identify hotspots. Can you imagine that into a holistic health system? I just look at it from what a bigger picture, and what preemptive, because in the long run, that's saving you money, that's saving you lives, that's saving, you can't put a price on that. But if you can prevent that ahead of time and treat it before it is in those later phases where it is much more expensive, if you can mitigate it early, how many lives, how many people could be impacted by that? I think that's very powerful.
Well, and that scenario that you mentioned, Tom, if we imagine 1 million veterans have taken on their personal self-sovereign infrastructure, identity, and coalesced the data about them from many, many sources, exactly that scenario that you're describing becomes possible, while without ever centralizing all of that data. We will not possess it in some giant data warehouse in the sky that can be breached and compromised. That's a giant security risk. We can introduce requests to access that data without ever, and computing upon it where it lives, without ever centralizing it, and find those trends and act upon them in many different ways, with the full granular consent of the participants, and absolutely no privacy risk whatsoever. And that it's something super simple that's for somebody outside of healthcare, it's kind of unimaginable. Let's say you're a public health official, and all I want to know is how many people of X criteria have Y thing in Z place at time A to B. Couldn't be a simpler query. You could make up 1,000 different scenarios. So let me just hit a button with that query and get the answer. No, not even close. We are an ocean apart from that seemingly straightforward element. And part of that is because everything that we do in data in healthcare, we try to go around the person. It's always around, over, every which way, but the person themselves in the center of those workflows. And now we have the capability to make that cost-effective, logistically feasible, and we have technology such that it's no longer going to require technical upskilling. The introduction of the new ways of interfacing with deep technology, with natural language communication that can meet you where you are at different reading levels in hundreds of different languages. This is a remarkable change in the art of the possible in an incredibly short period of time. So I would like to offer each of you, my esteemed colleagues, the opportunity to make a closing remark. We're only slightly over time, and I'm going to start with you, Dr. Orley.
Absolutely. I've been listening carefully to this very insightful conversation, and I want to actually echo on something Dr. Tete said earlier. He gave an example of an exposure that he had during service, and I think that the paradigm right now is that service members are basically vulnerable to the whims of the military operations. They're not necessarily in the decision-making seat, and they have these exposures, they have these injuries as a result of their service. But the paradigm, the shift right now is that now they actually can own their own data, and they have sovereignty over their data. And the shift is from ability to from an assessment of their disability from a third party, such as myself, to now ownership of their disability. And the other element is the shift from ability during service to disability after service, which doesn't necessarily have to be the case anymore because they're just much more informed about the whole process from the beginning, from day one of when they begin service. And so it may actually prevent exposures uh, earlier on when soldiers may speak up and say, I'm really concerned about this, this smoke inhalation exposure. I don't think it's right. And they may question their superiors. So because they're being empowered to do so. And that stems from the fact that they own their own medical data, right? So they're aware of what conditions they've started to develop, even at the earliest stages of developing those conditions too. So we can catch disease earlier as well by people having more access to their own medical data. So that's an exciting development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Orley. And let's move to you, Dr. Mannion.
Make sure I unmute first before I begin. There's a lot to be said and a lot that's been said here, but I think the one thing that we need to remember too is not just the families of the military and veteran and first responders, but especially when there is a significant injury, the caregivers can have a significant impact to them. One of the things that we have seen in that 15-year longitudinal study, which has a caregiver arm, is that there's just a very large challenge to those individuals who day in, day out have to continue to care for people who may not get fully better or who may not fully be able to thrive. And that can be a spouse, that can be a significant other, that can be a child, that can be a parent, that can be a friend. And so keeping in mind those long-term caregivers is something we should really keep front and center as well.
Thank you, Sean. Very, very important point. Let's go to you, Carla.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the messages, the wisdom that was shared. I think is tremendous here, and I am thrilled to know that we do have a solution. I've been on this journey pretty much all my life from birth, right? And former spouse was Air Force combat vet, and it was really quite a journey, knowing just sort of what he had to go through, and to realize that we're actually working on a solution that can address some of these challenges is just beyond, right? It really does get to be exciting. And that's where I'd like to have that glimmer of hope, the glimmer of hope. We do know it's horrible. I remember running, I was in Idaho, and I was running on the independent ticket with Brock Pierce as the vice presidential candidate in 2020. And we were speaking to an audience, and I had a bunch of vets come up to me and start talking about, do you know what it's like to have to wait in line at the VA? And I was like, I do know what that's like, actually. And to know that we can have now more of a solution that allows psychologically our veterans and even our enlisted, right, to feel like there's hope because it's more personalized. And I'm not having to tell my story over and over and over, again, which, by the way, is traumatizing in and of itself, right? To me, I'll leave on these last words. I absolutely will never give up, right, on our ability to finally put to bed this challenge that many of our vets have to live with. And I know personally, I'm thrilled with what we're doing at AI Mind Systems to make sure that the solution shows itself.
Thank you so much, Carla. And we're so pleased that you are jumping in on the National Hero Initiative. Thank you very much. And now let's go to Tom.
Well, thank you. I echo the comments. I couldn't be more honored to be in the presence of people who are so dedicated to the mission of helping military family members, first responders, our veterans, and our active duty at this point to really set conditions for success. Our nation has to be held accountable for that sacred promise. Our leadership needs to be accountable to that sacred promise that those who go forth and serve for us in our stead, that we will take care of them when they come home. And this is a family business. Bottom line is that how you take care of today's veterans will certainly, absolutely have to do with not just the people who serve directly in combat, but look at the people who here may not have served in uniform, but have dedicated their lives to serving those because of some attachment or some family member or some family tradition. So our family tradition, we wouldn't blink for a weapon system to the tune of millions and trillions of dollars that would save lives in combat. We have to have that same mentality when it comes to saving lives when they return. And at the end of the day, no one serves alone and no one retires alone. So how do we make sure that we can make sure that people find those tribes, find the services in a way that doesn't require a tremendous amount of burden on their end? We need to do better. We can do better. We're smarter. We have the technology. We have abilities to do things. We can't just say that's just the way it's always been. We have to do better for everybody. And as we know, as the military leads the way, or as veteran organizations lead the way, or as our services lead the way, it sets unbelievable precedent for dual use capability down the road. We serve as a social experiment and pilot so many times for things that could be better. And this could have ramifications and echoes across our own domestic healthcare system, but globally with not only our allies and partners, but in those second, third world areas where every dollar counts. And if we can cut back bureaucracy and create an opportunity to ease human suffering in any way, I think that this could just be the first part of that. So again, privileged to be on this team, and really looking forward to what we can do together.
Thank you so much, Tom. And it just in a moment, I'm going to offer you the last word, Dr. Teta. I just wanted to remark that all of you are such an inspiration individually, and the coming together, it feels profound. And I wanted to just make a comment that we are not all here assembled in an attitude of complaint against our existing institutions. That is not our perspective or our point of view. We have brand new opportunities where we, the people, have radical new empowerment and new possibilities, where we, the people, together can formulate infrastructures, solutions, deployment models, governance models, economic systems. We are eager to partner and collaborate with our public sector counterparts. That's tremendous, but actually our path is not gated by that. We are able to do this as a culture, as the military and family community, as the Web3 community, as the innovators in AI. We can do this. That's never been possible before. So this is not a litany of complaints and criticism. This is a miracle of modernity at an inflection point that we can change something incredible, and support the missions of the agencies and the government services that strive to achieve these missions against enormous challenges on their own front. So I just wanted to clarify that that attitudinal tuning that I know all of you share. So thank you for that, and thank you for giving so much heart into this, and into those who serving those who have and will serve. Over to you, Dr. Teta, for the last word. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thank you so much for the last word. I certainly don't deserve the last word, but I will say this. It is the last word would be gratitude, and then and the last word is gratitude, and definitely gratitude for being part of this group and part and company of this august collection of talent, and certainly for the mission that you've articulated and sort of helped us all zero in on, Heather, for your leadership as well. Grateful for that. One of my favorite individuals of all time is Goethe, who's a German, sort of polymath who's done all kinds of things, and he's often quoted in healthcare circles. And one of the quotes that I always cling to is he says that knowing is not enough, we must apply, and willing is not enough, we must do. And I believe that, what we've talked about and what we've espoused through the National Hero Initiative is something that's going to come to fruition at some point, because it will have to. It's just a natural evolution of what's coming. And knowing that that's the case, if it's not now, then when? It should be us doing that, right? And if it's not us, then who? It should be us doing that as well. The technology is there, the will is there. We need to apply all of these things, and I think that the way I'd like to end again is with gratitude and hope that those watching this webinar, those that have been even within a whisper of any of our words here, will be empowered, inspired, and willing to join in making this all come to fruition, so that we can achieve this, vision that may sound and seem and feel like science fiction right now, but all of us know, especially those that have been working in the AI space and technology and Web3 and blockchain and all these things, the only difference between science fiction and reality is time. And we have an opportunity now to sort of, reduce that time and make things happen just as we've envisioned them. So thank you, Heather. Thank you. And thank you to my colleagues. It was really great to have this discussion, and hope that it moves the needle and empowers people to join us and move things forward.
Thank you, Dr. Teta, and thank you all. We will see you again second Fridays of the month. Have a lovely day.